The Backyard Show is the first installment in the Barney and the Backyard Gang series, and this was an experience. I grew up watching Barney and Friends, but I have no recollection of Barney and the Backyard Gang, so I decided to check out the first episode, and I have to say, it's pretty impressive, but I'm glad they made some changes so that we have Barney and Friends as we know it. And I will probably watch more of the Backyard Gang, and I won't compare the Backyard Gang to Barney and Friends in every episode discussion. But obviously, this is my first time watching the show, so I will be doing some comparisons here. So there will be quite extensive spoilers as I go into quite a bit of detail about this. This is the first direct-to-video Backyard Gang, and it was released in 1988. And what's pretty cool is that some of the kids in this are actually kids that we then go on to have in Barney and Friends, which I hadn't realised. I hadn't realised before watching that. And what I rather enjoyed about that is that it includes some of my favourites, including Tina, who is one of my personal favourites. And it actually starts out very, very differently insofar as we have I Love You being sung at the start. The lyrics are slightly different, but generally it's the same. And it's not Barney. It's two children and their parents singing it. I hadn't expected that at all. And the father goes off to play golf, and we learn that actually it's his birthday, and the kids decide to practice putting on a show so that when he comes home, they can do a birthday performance for him. And they decide to do this in the garage, which is actually their clubhouse. And the Backyard Gang refers to, well, the children and their friends. And there, of course, we have Barney and the Backyard Gang. And while they're looking through the boxes for costumes to wear, they find Barney the Dinosaur, the little soft toy. And I have to say, it doesn't look as cute and cuddly as the Barney and Friends soft toy. And then Barney transforms into, well, the living, breathing, moving Barney the Dinosaur. And the children are mesmerized during this transition. It's definitely very different and more of a process than it is in Barney and Friends. And all I can say is I am so glad they made him rounder and brighter, because the Barney in Backyard Gang is a much darker purple colour. It's not bright and vibrant, it's not a fun colour to look at. And he's also a lot more angular, particularly his face. I think he looks thinner and his face is much more angular. And I just think, I know with the benefit of hindsight, it's easy to say that this design of Barney doesn't look good. But I do have to say the Barney and Friends design, it's softer, it's cuddlier, it's brighter, it's much better. And the voice as well, it isn't great. Barney is actually voiced by Bob West in this, but he does sound a little bit different. And again, with the benefit of hindsight, I can see that the voice we get for Barney and Friends is much friendlier, much happy, much... It's higher in pitch, and it's just much more pleasant to listen to. But had I not seen Barney and Friends, I don't think the voice would have bothered me too much. But something that I did notice is that whenever Barney speaks, it doesn't feel like the voice is coming out of Barney. And this is not really something that I ever noticed with Barney and Friends. So I think there were definitely things that they needed to fine-tune to get to Barney and Friends. It almost feels like this is a pilot. And I'm keen to see what happens as the Backyard Gang series progresses. But once I got over the initial shock of the design of Barney, I was able to enjoy the rest of the episode, and it's very educational. We have some really great songs. Absolutely, it focuses on the power of imagination, as Barney and Friends does. And we have, quite delightfully, 6 little ducks. In my last Barney and Friends discussion, I mentioned that the umbrellas for 6 little ducks gave me such strong nostalgia that I'd completely forgotten about. So to see them in this again, I was rather delighted, and I had a lot of fun with it. We have some other great songs. We have Humpty Dumpty, although there's some peculiar animation on the screen very briefly at a couple of times, and I don't like that very much because it pulls away from the main setting. But I'm not too bothered. It's not a big deal. And then the mother actually comes into the garage at one point to see how the children are getting on. Barney is hiding at this point. I like the fact that they're keeping up this pretense that he is from their imagination, so the grown-ups wouldn't be able to see him. And the mother then sings, "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands," which again was not something I was expecting. I assumed the mother would be in it at the beginning, maybe at the end. And then we do get to see a montage of performances that the children put on for their parents. And of course, the performances are absolutely brilliant, and the costumes they wear are really engaging, and the singing and the dancing. It's all brilliant. And then the father joins in to do the hokey cokey, and I love that it's encouraging parents to get involved. I think that that's a really brilliant thing that a lot of parents, I want to say particularly fathers, but I don't want to generalize too much. But I think the fact that they focused on the father there worked really well, because a lot of parents don't necessarily want to get up and dance and sing with their children, at least in front of a crowd of other adults, because they might be embarrassed. But this is showing that actually it's okay to the parents watching this with their children. It's fine to get up and have fun with your kids. And I just love that it's promoting that. It's also educational in various ways. For example, it says that you shouldn't play with bees because it's dangerous. And there are, of course, other opportunities for learning throughout. I'm impressed. It's not as good as Barney and Friends, but I feel like Barney and Friends wouldn't be as good as it was from the beginning if they didn't have Barney and the Backyard Gang as a kind of testing opportunity. The design of Barney it's still recognizably Barney the Dinosaur, but it's a surprise. It's an experience, and honestly, the Backyard Show delighted me, and I'm keen to see what happens and how the series progresses and what else they have in store. I think there are maybe 8 of them. I'm not 100% sure on that, but give or take. And I'm looking forward to checking them out. Still no recollection. Having seen this, I still don't remember Barney and the Backyard Gang, but I can certainly see why it proved to be popular and why it led on to what became, of course, the very successful Barney and Friends.